Um, okay, hi everyone. So I'm Arso from the Moincha team, and this is my presentation for this lab meeting. So the name of this work is Generating Diverse Challenging Terrains for Legged Robots using Quality Diversity Algorithm. Okay, so first of all, um, it is important for legged robots to have the ability to work on uneven terrains such as sand, forest, or rocky terrains. So for instance, let's say we want to perform a rescue mission after an earthquake using a robot. Then in that case, we may want the robot to work on the rubbles of collapsed buildings or that kind of thing. And recently, there have been a lot of progress in this field, especially through the use of reinforcement learning. However, still, some failure cases can happen. So, for instance, the robot may fall down, and obviously, this is something we want to avoid because it's dangerous. It could damage the robot or harm someone. And one way to avoid these failure cases is to test the, the robot and the controller in many situations, like especially diverse terrains. Um, However, the field of finding failure cases by testing the robot on lots of diverse terrains is not very developed for legged robots. Um, so this is because the progress in legged robots are quite recent. But still, there has been a few works. So here on the left, the researcher applies some pushing forces to a quadruped robot to find some failure cases. And the researchers found especially two interesting things. So first of all, they realized that it's actually hard to find manually the failure cases, and generating adversarial attack is actually much more efficient. And also they showed that after finding those failure cases, they could use them to improve the controller. However, this paper only focuses on applying pushing forces to the robot. It does not focus on the terrain themselves. And here on the right, so this is a paper where the researchers use a GAN to generate realistic terrains in order to create a set of realistic terrains to test the robot. But actually, this is just for benchmarking, and it doesn't focus on finding failure cases of a specific controller. So what I propose to do is to generate terrains to find failures of a specific controller. So to do so, I propose to use a kind of algorithm called quality diversity algorithms. So quality diversity algorithms are a kind of genetic algorithm. Um, However, traditional genetic algorithm try to optimize a single optimal solution. However, quality diversity algorithms are different in the sense that um, they try to they try to find a set of diverse, high quality solutions. Um, and the notion of diversity here um, is chosen manually based on what we want. So let me give you one example. Um, so basically here, the algorithm would create this n-dimensional archive. So here we have 2 dimensions. And let's say we optimize a controller for a legged robot. Let's say a bipedal robot, and we want the controller to work as fast as possible. So the velocity will correspond to the fitness. And let's say the descriptor 1 corresponds to how much we use the right leg, descriptor 2 corresponds to how much we use the left leg. Then the solution contains in that cell will correspond to a controller that basically only use the right leg. And this one will correspond to a controller where we only use the left leg. So anyway, that was just an example to explain quality diversity algorithms. But what I want to focus on is not evolving controllers. It's about evolving terrains, and especially I want to find diverse, challenging terrains for leg robots. So first of all, to do so, I need to define the search space of the algorithm, which corresponds to all the terrains the algorithm can create to find those failure cases. So here I define the terrains using a mixture of super Gaussians. So a super Gaussian is basically just a Gaussian with an additional parameter p that allows to have a flat top or sharper slopes. And so each two-dimensional super Gaussian is defined by 8 parameters. And the terrain is made of 8 super Gaussians. So in total, I have 64 parameters to define each terrain. And so the QD algorithm will evolve these 64 values to create the terrains we want to find. So the goal is to create an archive where each cell will contain one interesting terrain. So here I, like for the diversity, instead of considering the diversity of the terrains themselves, what I propose to do is to create 6 different penalties, and each penalty corresponds to one behavior from the controller that we want to avoid. So basically the behavior of the robot when it travels the terrain. So for instance, it can be when there's a collision or when the robot does not respect the command input. So basically the descriptors allow to represent combinations of different failure cases. And what I try to optimize, so the fitness here, is the overall terrain difficulty. So this is basically the sum of the penalties I use to define the descriptors. So in the end, this is the framework I obtain. So I have the quality diversity algorithm that generates mixture of super Gaussian parameters. Using that, we generate the terrain and we evaluate the terrain in a simulator. So basically, the robot travels the terrain and records the descriptors corresponding to the different penalties and the fitness. And we use this descriptor and fitness to update the archive. And then we give it to the QD algorithm again to generate new terrains parameters. So we do this in a loop for as many iterations as we want. And the output of the algorithm is this n-dimensional archive containing terrains, where basically each cell corresponds to a terrain with a specific failure case. So I performed some experiments. So I used the quadruped animal robot and the bipedal chassis robot. And for the controllers for those robots, I used the method presented in this paper, where the controller are learned using reinforcement learning by teaching the robots to work on some handcrafted terrains, such as slopes, stairs, or random nodes. And then I run my framework for each robot. And the framework was able to find some interesting failure cases. So here in this video, you can see in front of the robot, there's a green arrow. It represents the control input for the robot. So in terms of X and Y velocity, and also the heading the robot should have. So here what we can see is that for some reason, on that kind of narrow platform, the controller of the Cassie robot tends to look towards its left side. So actually, I think this is quite an interesting result because we would not necessarily have found it if we just manually tested the controller on handcrafted terrains, because this behavior actually only happens when this narrow platform has a specific width. And here you can see another example with the animal robot, where basically the robot just gets stuck in that position. And this is a very specific case. It really does not happen often. So then what I did is that I retrained the controller using the terrains I generated. So basically, I retrained it on a data set made of half of the terrains I generated and half handcrafted terrains, such as random noise, pyramid, etc. And so here are the quantitative results. So the baseline here is a controller that is trained with the same amount of computation, but only on handcrafted terrains. And my method use half handcrafted terrains and half generated terrains. And I tested the controllers on the two kind of terrains. And I used two metrics, which is the reward from the reinforcement learning algorithm and the success rate. So basically, we consider there's a failure when the robot has a collision with the pelvis or with the body. And if there's no collision, then we consider it's a success. So as you can see, our method actually performs similarly to the baseline on handcrafted terrains. However, it performs much better than the baseline on the hard cases. So here you can see some example before and after retraining. One more thing, for the test set of the generated terrains, these are not the same as the terrains I used for the training. Yeah, you can see another example here. So basically, we can see that the original controller is stuck here, but after training, the controller is able to pass over the obstacle. And finally, you can see another example with the Cassie robot. So overall, I proposed the quality diversity formulation to generate diverse challenging terrains for legged robots. And I showed that the proposed framework is able to find some interesting corner cases. And I also showed that the generated terrains can be used to improve the controller. So for future work, I plan to work on the computational efficiency of QD algorithms, because these algorithms are computationally very expensive. Also, I plan to consider more complex terrains. So for instance, with varying frictions or stiffness. And also, I plan to perform experiments on real robots, especially to test whether the improved controller is also actually more robust in the real world. Okay. Thank you for your attention. Do you have any questions?